$325 million. That is what an American company raised in 1987 by borrowing against the royalties its Japanese licensee sent it. It used the money to service the debt it had taken on in order to buy itself. 3 years later, that company filed for Chapter 11. 4.5 months after that, the licensee owned about 70% of it. So we do what we always do. 6 boxes. Where it was born, where it is incorporated, where it is headquartered, who holds the shares, who makes the food, and who pays the person at the register. For 7-Eleven, no 2 of those answers land in the same place. The company is exact about its own age and silent about everything surrounding it. Quote, "The company's origin storied as the world's first convenience store, founded in 1927 as Southland Ice Company, under Southland Corporation, before the 7-Eleven name was coined in 1946. End quote. Its Japanese parent says the same in its own research paper, established in the United States in 1927, renamed in 1946 to reflect the store hours, which ran from 7 in the morning to 11 at night. A July 2026 press release notes that 7-Eleven celebrates its 100th anniversary next year, which fixes the arithmetic at 1927. That is the whole of it. The founding city, the intermediate shop name you have probably read, and the iStock employee who is said to have started selling eggs and bread and milk, none of the 3 appears in anything the company has published. That is not a claim, they are false. It is a finding about a company that will date itself to the year, name its founder as Joe C. Tomp Son Jr., and quote him, give the customers what they want, when and where they want it, and still leave those details out of its own record. At the end of 1987, Southland operated 7,818 stores and licensed 521 more. That December, it stopped being a public company. The buyer was JT Acquisition Corporation, which the annual report describes as, quote, a Texas corporation formed at the direction of the Tomp Son Company, end quote, and names John P. Tomp Son, Jr. W. Tomp Son and Joe C. Tomp Son Jr. behind it. The company also gives its founder's name as Joe C. Tomp Son Jr. The filings in front of us do not set out the generations, so we will not. The mechanics, a cash tender for 31,500,000 shares, about 64% of the stock, then a merger completed on the 15th of December, 1987. Read the financing slowly. A $2 billion term loan. A further $495 million term loan for refinancing. A $450 million revolver. Around $1.8 billion of junk, including $350 million of 15.75% senior subordinated notes due 1997. The report's own summary, approximately $4 billion of debt incurred in the LBO. The 1991 report would later size the whole transaction at $4.9 billion. 15.75% on a business that sells cigarettes and coffee. Which is why Japan ended up as Collateral. Southland had signed York 7 Company Limited in November 1973. The Japanese company's own history records a licensing agreement and area service contract concluded with the Southland Corporation, USA. The first store opened in Toyasu, Kodoku, Tokyo in May 1974. 24-hour trading began in Fukushima in June 1975. York 7 became 7-Eleven Japan in January 1978. By 1987, that license was solid enough to borrow against. The company told its shareholders it had put together, quote, a financing arrangement to monetize its Japanese license royalties, end quote. It raised roughly $325 million that way. The sentence sits in Southland's own annual report, under Southland's own name. It pledged the money its own licensee sent it, and paid down the debt it had taken on to buy itself. The Chapter 11 petition was filed on the 24th of October, 1990. The reorganization was consummated on the 5th of March, 1991. One line from the 1991 annual report does the work. Quote, the The purchaser acquired approximately 70% of the company's common stock for $430 million in cash. End quote. The purchaser was IYG Holding Company, a Delaware corporation, quote, jointly owned by Yi Toyo Keisto Company Limited and 7-Eleven Japan Company Limited, end quote. 51% EV Toyo Keisto, 49% 7-Eleven Japan. Elsewhere in the same document, a company introducing itself to its new owners. Quote, our relationship with IY began in 1973 when it became Southland's first international licensee. End quote. Pre-bankruptcy holders, the TOMP sons among them, received warrants exercisable at $1.75 a share through February 1996. The reorganized company still carried $3,041.85 million of long-term debt at the end of 1991, about $3.2 billion including the portion reclassified as current, and was down to 6,491 company and franchise stores in the United States and Canada. Resist the arithmetic that suggests itself. The 1987 figure is an enterprise value including debt. The 1991 figure is cash for a majority of newly reorganized equity, after the old equity had effectively been destroyed. The story is not that a company lost 7/8 of its value. It is that the shareholders' capital was wiped out, and the Japanese licensee bought most of whatever replaced it. On the 1st of September 2005, 7-Eleven Japan, then holding about 72.7% through IYG, announced a tender offer for the minority at $32.50 share, quote, a premium of approximately 15% over the per-share closing price, end quote. The stated logic was almost apologetic. 7-Eleven, Incorporated needed to spend on merchandising, store renovation, distribution and logistics, and information systems. That spending would depress near-term profitability, and minority holders were being offered an exit from the risk. The company put the cash requirement at roughly $1 billion. The offer closed on the 8th of November 2005 at $37.50 a share in cash, raised from the announced $32.50. Afterwards, 7-Eleven Japan held about 95.4%. On that same 1st of September, in Tokyo, 7&I Holdings Company Limited was incorporated. A pure holding company. Capital 50 billion yen. Registered at Nibancho 8-8, Chiyoda-ku. Listed in Tokyo as 3382. One caution about today. 7-Eleven's brand page says the American company is wholly owned by 7&I Holdings Company Limited. A company history from November 2005 calls it a wholly owned subsidiary of 7-Eleven Japan Company Limited. We could not establish the exact intermediate chain of ownership as it currently stands from primary documents, and we are not going to smooth that over. For the year ended the 28th of February, 2026, 7&I reported group total sales of 16.9920 trillion yen and consolidated operating revenue of 10.4302 trillion yen. The company explains the gap in its own footnote. The group's total sales include the sales of franchisees. Our calculation from those two published figures, 16.9920 trillion minus 10.4302 trillion is 6.5618 trillion yen. That is money spent in 7-Eleven stores that never reaches 7-Eleven's income statement, because the stores are not 7-Elevens. The segment table makes the same point from the other direction. In that year, the domestic convenience store segment produced operating revenue of 914.6 billion yen and operating income of 222.5 billion yen. The overseas convenience store segment produced operating revenue of 8,556.8 billion yen and operating income of 222.2 billion yen. Nearly identical profit from revenue lines in order of magnitude apart, because the domestic line is largely franchise charges rather than what shoppers actually spend. As of the 29th of February, 2024, 7-Eleven Japan had 21,170 franchised stores and 193 of its own. Our calculation, 21,170 divided by 21,363 is 99.10% franchised. The published terms are specific. A type of franchisee brings the land and the building and pays a 7-Eleven charge of 43% of gross profit on a 15-year contract. A Type C franchisee takes land and building from the company on a sliding charge. The company pays 80% of utilities. There is a floor, 19 million yen of annual gross profit guarantee for Type A, 17 million for Type C. And in both types, hiring the staff is the franchisee's responsibility.